Welcome everyone. I am Michaela Aphrodite and this is Athena Alea, and today we're going to be talking about a very controversial subject where we're dealing with in today's society where there's a worldwide epidemic of low self-esteem and self-loathing. People are having a problem with formulating healthy relationships and creating abusive relationships. This subject is very passionate for both of us because we are seeing women rising up in power and relationships are falling apart. Everyone is struggling. We realize that women, when they try to exercise their own personal value, they get knocked down. Men are finding it uncomfortable to find their place. Either they're too emotional and too passive or too domineering and controlling. Women are struggling with, I do not want to be that person that is submissive. I want to regain my power. I want to gain my value. So in today's conversation, we are going to be talking about this major problem that's destroying relationships, finding the root of the problem and how to solve it. Understand, we love all of you. We love all women and we love all men. And our goal is only to help those relationships become healthy and flourish. So I want to kind of ask you a question. Why is it that we are now witnessing a worldwide epidemic of low self-esteem, self-loathing, inability to formulate healthy relationships? Why do you suppose that men are really challenged by women? It's this divine feminine energy that's starting to rise, and men are really struggling with this. What do you think? What do you think the reason is for that?
Well, it's a really good question, and I certainly think it deserves to be analyzed and addressed, just because we we do see this, what I would consider this epidemic of low self-esteem and self-loathing, the inability for people to formulate healthy relationships, and we have to ask ourselves why, because it leads to so many problems. I want to start out first just by, relaying to our audience that Aphrodite and I are not attempting to make a blanket judgment against all men. What we're doing is we want to provide analysis of, this general kind of energy that has been being noticed for a long time, and it needs to be addressed at some point so that, we as individuals and collectively can move forward into a future where we can promote healthy relationships with ourselves and with others. Um, so when I speak about, the masculine and feminine energy, I just want everyone to be clear that I'm talking about a more general energy rather than specific men or men, or men. It's not a man-hating situation. Um, the treatment of women, I think historically really is at the root cause of all of this personally. If one kind of looks into the history of how women have been treated, we can see that there have been kind of conflicting ideas throughout history since, even the ancient times in Mesopotamia as to, what the role of women is. For example, in the Code of Hammurabi, they're very specific about how women should be subservient to men. And we see this theme, being kind of relayed throughout various aspects of history, both, not both, but, in politics and general society, in religion. Yet at the same time, throughout history, there's also been there's a lot of evidence to show that, certain cultures had a lot of rights for women. Being able to, in ancient Egypt, for example, women had an exceptional amount of rights compared to the previous Mesopotamian counterparts in ancient Greece. It was kind of, a mixed bag. If you were in general society and you were married as a woman, you didn't have your own property rights. You're kind of tucked away, in the home. But if you were a part of a spiritual center, then you had a lot of rights. You could own property. You could write manuscripts. There was a lot of equality, between men and women in those particular centers. I think that, as history kind of, continued on, at least for us here, in this day and age, right? Something that has impressed itself upon us as a society and collectively, has been this question of women's roles. Conservative religious perspectives on tradition, tend to keep this idea of, what the role of a woman should be. And some people would consider that to be fairly subservient to men. That is it's a controversial thing to say, because if you were to talk to somebody that is, for more conservative religion, their perspective might be, well, this is the healthiest way, to have a family and this and that. So I'm certainly not, trying to say that it certainly, is definitive that if a particular religion, if a man is the head of the household and he sees himself as the protector and the provider, but he's a loving, caring man and he listens to his wife and he makes decisions with her, then I wouldn't consider that to be discriminatory. But if a man, says, I'm the head of the household and that means you need to do what I say and you can't do XYZ, I'd be more inclined to say that's discriminatory. And I think that, as women entered the workforce en masse, during World War II, when men were fighting in the war and women had to start working, in the industrial parts of society. And then women started to kind of break free from the idea of traditional marriage. And we had the breakdown of the nuclear family. These ideas of what a woman's role is have just come more to the surface than they ever did historically. And what I've just noticed is there has been, seemingly a backlash, with respect to I'll call it the more conservative patriarchal energy towards women, which, essentially emphasizes that a woman is subservient to a man, that a woman is his property, that he has some kind of ownership over her, and that he can make any number of comments or give any kind of feedback related to how she looks, who she hangs out with, what she can do. And that, I think, is what's led to this issue, because, women in general, archetypically speaking, are the sex that is meant to be, we're just ingrained in general, with being the compassionate, loving counterpart. We're the nurturers, we're the caregivers of the children, right? We're very empathetic. This doesn't mean that men can't be. It's just this is more general with the female gender. And when women are oppressed and essentially told that they can't, that they can only do one thing, but they can't do another, or they have to look a certain way because this way is inappropriate, then, constantly a woman is reflecting upon, how she needs to juggle herself in every environment to please somebody else. If I go to work, I have to look like this. If I go to church, I have to look like this. If I'm filming a podcast, I have to look like this. And then has to, undergo the scrutiny, from someone who says, oh, well, if you are this, then you can't be that. Or, how is it that you can wear, something that maybe kind of emphasizes your body, but you're talking about spirituality, for example, right? Like that. In some people's minds, those two things can't go together. And so a woman can never feel comfortable with herself, comfortable with her body. She's always put under a spotlight, a scope, to have to please someone else. So that, I think what's happened, is that over time, women have just shut down emotionally, and, they need to protect themselves. And so, when a woman who's supposed to be the nurturing, caregiving, empathetic component of the world, essentially shuts herself down emotionally. She can't be there to raise good young men and good young women, and good young, all of the above, essentially. She can't give the love that people need. And if that's concomitant with any other kind of abuse or something that maybe is happening in the family, or generational abuse, then how is it that we can expect for people to have healthy relationships with themselves and others when they're never getting properly nurtured in the first place by the component of our global consciousness that's meant to play that role, respectively. So again, this is all general in terms of archetypical energies,
Yeah.
for the record.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting because you know, a while back I was single for a good amount of time, and I definitely saw a lot of very confused men because I think that with this rise of femininity coming up, they they were very confused about their role. So they either became very submissive and passive and wouldn't make decisions, um, had a almost like codependent, or um, more of a follower than a leader, and they just very like meek and lost all that masculine energy within themselves, or they were extremely dominant and basically telling you, who you should be and how you should be, and this is the rules that kind of go along with it. And I saw this frequently, and it was difficult to even try to find somebody who had that energy balance within them, you know. And I'm seeing it today, just in the way people respond sometimes to me when it comes to men and posts and things that I put out there. Let me knock you down, little woman. And I've seen this happen multiple times. You question like where they are, they they come at you. Or
And
if they feel um, that potentially you are better in certain areas, highly more evolved spiritually, more gifted in those areas, they they want to push you down so that they can feel higher in those areas. And I personally kind of think it has to do with this massive confusion. Men just don't know what their place is anymore. You know, when women started to rise up in power, holding powerful positions and being capable of doing everything on their own without a man. I mean, in the 1950s, women couldn't support themselves. It was a struggle that if a woman had to go back to work or something, they were making half as much money as the man in the same position. And they really struggle with being able to, live without a husband taking care of them. And now women are making as much or more than men, and they're in higher positions. Sometimes they're bosses. So you've got this really strong confusion going on with men. I think they're struggling with who am I, you know?
oh yeah, I agree with you. The thing is that as women have been coming more have been growing into themselves and becoming more comfortable with saying, look, I don't want to be limited. I don't want to be boxed. I don't want to be told that I can be this and not that, or I can't do this. Um, the general self-esteem of women has started to lift up. Although I feel like it's, in some respects, what it's done is it's kind of almost taken on, its own kind of toxic mentality, right? So rather than women saying collectively, well, look, I'm free now, and I'm, I feel really good about myself and I'm going to go out there and then, start giving this love. It's been more like, well, I'm going to treat men the way they've treated me. Right.
Mhm.
Like I see this a lot in like, certain types of music. It's like, oh, you think you're a player? Well, I'm a player too, or I'm not saving you either. Get out of here, you little piece of crap. It's like almost as if women in trying to free themselves have become like what they consider to be their abusers, right? And that's unhealthy too. But the other side of the coin is that, the emphasis has been on the feminine energy rise, and it's taken away, from the masculine energy, which has been, so predominant for so long in our known history, right? Where men have been the dominant gender. They've taken on all the dominant roles in the household and, otherwise. There hasn't been this, this evening out, right? Like who are you guys, right? Have you guys asked yourselves who you are and what your role is? Have women have been asking themselves, how to balance out essentially the divine masculine and feminine. And, but and some men, I feel like, especially in, more alternative spiritual communities, have really embraced the idea of the true, pure divine feminine and have attempted to incorporate, the aspects of the masculine and feminine within them. But there's a lot of men, there's a huge swath of men out there that have never really approached it or don't know how to approach it, nor do they think maybe it's appropriate, right? There's still a lot of men out there that believe if you embrace any kind of feminine qualities at all, that means you're emasculated, and that you're not a real man. And so they judge themselves on that, right? Like if I cry, I'm not a man, I got to man up. And I see this changing, I think, with the younger generations. For example, my son is 17, and he and his friends have, I feel like, very balanced perspectives on men and women. It's grown past this idea that, okay, well, a woman can be equal in the workforce, right? Like everybody's pretty much started to establish that it's okay for women to be equal and or excel in the workforce, but not necessarily in other areas of society. Whereas the younger generations seem to have now taken that idea of equality, and female excellence, and have applied that. But I think they're applying it in a more balanced manner. They don't consider a strong female woman to be a presence that's emasculating, but rather empowering to them. My own son said to me, last week, he was like, Mom, you've really just shown me that there's nothing a woman can't do. This was not prodded, by the way. This came out of his own mouth. He's like, you have a PhD, you have a leadership position in your spiritual group, you're always out there helping people. And, he went through this list, and it was just so touching for me that my own son would say that, as essentially he's my male counterpart in life, because I got married when I was young, divorced, and I haven't remarried. So my son is almost like the reflection of the masculine back to me in my life. And it was just really touching, for me to see that, and also to see how he interacts with other women, his peers, and, women that are in leadership positions. He's incredibly respectful, but he doesn't act offended or emasculated, in any way. So, I personally, I feel like it's time for men, to also allow for themselves to have a rise of the divine feminine current within them, and to be accepting of that nurturing, loving energy, so they can nurture and love themselves and others, and not, bestow essentially, upon themselves and other people this mentality of having to be a man, and that means in this way or nothing. It's this way or you're emasculated, right? And your ego is totally crushed and you can't do anything. That's unfair to men. And for women, I think women need to continue embracing that divine feminine current, but in a healthy way, right? To recognize that doesn't mean, embracing these kind of what I would consider old guard patriarchal ideas as a manifestation of their freedom, but rather to embrace the idea of what the true divine feminine current is, which, which is loving, it's receptive, it's compassionate, right? And it doesn't matter what gender you have, right? They're archetypical energies, right? One energy is, more outward flowing. It's an initiating current. It's a current of leadership and protection, and the other current is a more receptive, empathetic current. But combining the two of them is what makes a whole person, right? And keeps men from, feeling as if they have to be emasculated or put other people down. And it keeps women from feeling as if they have to emasculate men in order to feel like they're empowered, right? It's not men or women specifically. That's the problem. It's the archetypical patriarchal current of oppression, of ownership, of needing to be the dominant force, of of competition in an unhealthy way, right? That's the to me that's the poison, right? That's the
Okay.
poison that has infected society and keeps people from being able to have true healthy relationships with themselves and others.
Yeah. Well, it's almost as if the women have kind of like role reversed and they start emasculating men, and then and what the men feel like is you don't need me, you know, and that's really sad because
That's very poignant.
yeah, they really, because the woman can, just like your son said, there's nothing that you can't do, right? So here comes the guy in a relationship and he's saying, where do I fall in line here? Like, where, at what point do you need me? And I think this is where the problem is because um, he has to feel like he's needed, and that's an issue right there. Um, if he's not needed, why can't you just be in a relationship with somebody and not be needed, but more so wanted? You value the other person for their attributes, not necessarily that you're paying the bills, or that you're mowing the grass, or that you're telling me how I can and can't dress, or making decisions for me. That's just because I am capable of doing all these different things doesn't mean that I don't need you, or even more so that I don't want you. I may want you because I love having conversations with you and spending time with you, and you know bouncing ideas off of you or doing something creative with you. I may like those things about you, but I don't need you. And that's where the problem is that they get stuck in this space. But I also want to bring up another issue that I hear all the time. I see posts by men over and over and over again that say things like, this general feeling about amongst a lot of men that feel like, if you're a nice guy, you're out of luck. And why is that? It's because they believe that they have to be mean in order to get a woman. I mean, do you know that there's this book called The Little Black Book that was actually written for men that are nerds and geeks that don't know how to get women? It shows them how to do it.
By
They
being a jerk.
Yeah. Mhm. Like, you go into a group of women. Here's one of the prime things, okay? You go into a group of women, and there's this beautiful woman. Let's say it's you because you're a beautiful woman, and you're standing there, and he walks over, and he knows that he's going to be ignored because he's not, quote unquote, attractive enough or too geeky or whatever. And so what he does is he immediately says something to the group of people, And then he addresses the most unattractive woman and starts talking to her. And as soon as the attractive woman says something to him, he looks at her, turns his head, and talks to somebody else and just completely disregards her over and over again until she starts to feel like, what's wrong with me? And starts trying to gain his attention. It's like, I have to abuse you to get, and there's this common belief, right? And I see it posted all over all the social media things. It's like, if you're a nice guy, you're out of luck. And that is not true because women actually like nice guys. The reason why it seems like women aren't attracted to nice guys is because they're unattracted to the type of guy that lacks certain qualities that they most likely will not have. These nice guys have a tendency of having traits like being very passive, very submissive, very inactive, retreating, and they tend to follow instead of lead. And they can even be, kind of codependent. And, women do like, masculine traits, but the problem here is that he thinks that's considered nice to be passive. I know a lot of really nice men that are not passive, that have a strong personality, but they respect women and they don't knock them down. So it's sort of like they think it has to be black or white. So I have to be an asshole and treat women, knock them down, treat them like what's written in this little black book to gain their attention or to gain their them to like them. Or I have to be completely passive, or because I'm nice, I can't get this. It's not true. It's like there's this imbalance that has happened to men, and they either go way over here and they're not showing attributes that a woman is actually attracted to, and or they're way over here and they're just total jerk faces and demoralizing, talking about like the way she dresses. And here's the newest thing is, if you're a spiritual woman and you're representing, a message from God, that you have to look a certain way. You can't dress a certain way. Oh, well, you're sexualizing yourself for God. It's, I mean, women are becoming more free with how they feel. And I will tell you this, if there's any guys out there um, watching this.
Which we hope there are. And we
Yeah,
love you, by the
yeah,
way.
love you too, right? Women do not dress for men. They actually dress for women. I mean, that is the honest to God truth, because I don't sit there and go over to my husband and say, hey, I bought these earrings and I did this. I sat there before we even started this podcast, had a conversation with you about repurposing jewelry and how I made these things. And I'm over here talking about this. Look how I made this. And I just bought this new blouse, this dress, and look at the color. I really like it. I was dressing for you. you know?
Aw, well, you look beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I dress honestly, I dress for me.
Well, I mean,
I dress in what makes me feel
right.
good.
This is true. This is true. Based
It's
on
a self-soothing for me, you
yeah,
know?
women are the ones that compliment us. They're the ones that's going to say you look beautiful or you make us feel good about ourselves, right?
Well,
Because
men will too, but then women will call them creeps, so, they're and that and there and there's a summary of what poor men have to deal with. I
well,
mean,
it really is. I feel really sorry for what's going on with men because it's difficult because they don't really understand the role.
well,
And
here's the thing. I feel like what we should do is get rid of this idea of what roles are.
mhm,
Because when you say you have a role, right? Like, well, what's your role at this company? You give a bullet point list of what your responsibilities are, right? And it essentially it puts you in a box of where you can be and where you cannot be. And I think that's one of the things that's core at this whole issue is we have to recognize that as human beings we're multifaceted creatures. You can play many roles in your life, And while each of those roles are a component of who you are as an individual, they're not you, right? Like I've met people in a certain type of situation, and then seen them some years later and they're shocked. They say, "Well, I didn't know that was you." And I'm like, "Well, they're both me, right? It's all me. It's just some people get to see certain facets of me that other people don't, right? Because there's certain situations where some things are appropriate and some things aren't. Like I cannot go into my work and have, deep conversations about mysticism and religion and stuff, right? That's a faux pas. But I'm still a PhD engineer. I'm still a spiritual person. They're both me. And I think we rarely get to display all of who we are to people, right? And that I think goes into the kind of the cooking pot here of this issue of you know self-worth and self-loathing and love, right? It's very hard to find opportunities where you can be your whole self and it's considered okay. So when you get into relationships with people, what you really want is you want for that other person to see who you are and accept you, right? But when we have this idea of roles, it makes it very difficult. And so then we end up with this issue that's really, I think, the number one core issue here, which is, you know, men and women have to be able to accept their divine masculine and divine feminine qualities within each of them, regardless of what gender they embody in the physical form or they choose for themselves. Those components exist. We have, in mysticism and hermeticism, it's called, marrying the sun and the moon, right? Together. We have to make it okay in our society for both men and women to accept their divine masculine and feminine and integrate them and express them in healthy ways, right? When we don't, that's when we have all these little various phenomena like the little black book. Why was that even made a thing? I'll tell you exactly why. Because women in their comeuppance, right, being traumatized, started taking on the attributes of the toxic masculinity, right? It's like, women went into the workforce and they were oppressed, like, well, you still can't, you're here in the workforce but you still can't do this for some number of years, right? And women, what did women start doing? They started behaving like men so that they could gain managerial positions and be respected by men. And then men would be like, "Oh, well, you're just acting like an aggressive, dude." And, we even see, I even see it in my own workplace. It's like women will trample on other women, right? As a display of this toxic masculinity, so that because they feel like it's going to help them, creep up the corporate ladder, right? And
Don't
so,
men
these women wanting to empower themselves by taking on essentially the characteristics of their abuser, so to speak, also still want to be looked at as women. They're still, they're expressing what they consider to be a masculine quality. It's not a healthy masculine quality, but what they think, is what men are, because they want to be respected and they don't want to have to work twice as much for half as much. That's what I was always told by my mom. Um, you know, they're expressing these masculine qualities, but they still see themselves as a woman, right? And they want to be still recognized as a woman, and but not treated in an oppressive way. They want to be loved and respected for being a woman. And they don't feel, those kind of women that haven't integrated their divine masculine and feminine, go looking around for men. And because in their mind, a man is this, they play this role, and the alpha or no, the beta males, aren't playing that quote unquote role, right? They go out to look for someone who's going to treat them like a woman and throw them down and, do all this stuff. And then what happens essentially, well, what they end up finding is a toxic person because they haven't integrated the divine masculine within themselves. So then the men who haven't integrated the masculine and feminine within themselves think, well, women only want guys that are assholes. No, only women who have not integrated want assholes because they don't know any better, right? They're still living in an abusive mentality situation. A woman who's integrated those components within herself can see a man for his worth, regardless if he's a quote unquote alpha or a beta, right? She can see him and accept him for who he is. If he's a more passive individual, she doesn't feel like he needs to be this other way for her to feel loved and cherished, right? She can allow him to love and cherish her the way that she needs and be comfortable communicating her needs to him. And he can feel comfortable, cherishing her the way he wants and also the way he needs. That's when the healthy relationship stuff kicks in. So it's, I think it's like what's happening is there's, because historically speaking, there's been a lot of conflict in the global human consciousness with respect to men and women's roles. And now those roles have been quote unquote shifting. And, there's a balancing act going on. There's going to be a swing in one direction and eventually it's going to come back. But, you know, if we want to take what's happening now and really create something that's good and that's healthy and is going to bring future generations forth into a more loving global consciousness, we have to, each of us individually, take time to explore what masculine and feminine mean, what the healthy expressions are, emphasize the healthy expressions, atrophy the unhealthy expressions, and then allow those two components to be integrated and to look for other people who have integrated that too. I mean, just consider it genetically speaking, right? In terms of Darwinism, what goes forth in history, is what's chosen predominantly, by the masses. If more and more people are choosing to couple with others who've integrated themselves into a higher state of consciousness and into a mature level of their understanding of themselves, we're going to keep creating future generations like that because they're going to be taught that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I feel like that's what we need to do is, we have to change the script at some point and stop the blame game and recognize there's been a lot of historical trauma back and forth between men and women and negate that script and write a new script.
Yeah, I actually like the fact that you said this because women are traumatizing men. They're demasculating them. And men are really trying to push for that power back. And it's really becoming what you would call a power struggle. Now, what I actually hear from women that I work with, almost every single one of them, they tell me that when they experience something like this, they label the men as narcissist. It seems like this common thing that seems to happen. And I remember speaking to this one woman and I said, "Why do you feel like he's a narcissist?" "Well, he does this and this and this and this." And I said, "That doesn't make him a narcissist." I said, "Do you even know what a narcissist is?" And so I had to explain to her about the story of
Narcissist.
yeah, narcissist. How he ran, he saw this lake or a pond or something, and he saw his reflection and he fell in love with it. And and so the idea of narcissism is somebody that loves themselves so much that they put themselves above everything. And just because a man is controlling or dominant doesn't make him a narcissist. He can actually really love you. It's just he's having an issue with how to demonstrate what that love looks like. And from him,
Women, healthy women, to show what that looks like.
right, exactly. But there's also this idea of losing themselves. They fear losing themselves by giving up that power. I mean, I've heard that as well. It's like, who am I if she doesn't need me? Who am I if I don't I don't have a quote unquote role in this relationship.
Oh, well, this is a deep, deep psychological thing for men,
Mhm.
because if you just let's just consider, you know, the general, again, general male experience with women, right? Uh, when a man is young and his primary caretaker is a woman, right? The mother, what is she doing? She's giving him everything, feeding him, clothing him, tending to him, to his every need, right? And especially now too, right, with the breakdown of the nuclear family, women have been the primary caregivers of men, uh statistically speaking, right? So a lot of guys aren't even getting like the a strong male influence in their life as a father. They may be seeing a number of men come through their mother's lives, as she tries to date while her son is young. But everything is about it's mom focused, right? And then all of a sudden you get to a certain age and you get booted out the nest in one way or another. And you're trying, now as a man to figure out women in a not in a role that's not being their mom, right? And it's like when you're a little kid and your mom's tending to everything, right? You have a feeling like, well, mom, she needs me. I need her and mom needs me too. So when a guy feels like a woman doesn't need him, then he also feels like the woman doesn't want him.
Mhm.
So
Right,
those two
exactly.
things go hand in hand, and it's a very
Right.
deep psychological rooting.
Mhm. So it seems like what we're seeing here is both masculine and feminine are sort of, or I'm sorry, male and female are are really struggling, and they really don't know how to have relationships anymore. Women are demasculating men, and men are showing up dominant and controlling and trying to knock her down so that she doesn't she finds her place. It's, don't wear that, you're over, don't post that, don't dress like that, don't do this, don't do that, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, like constantly critiquing, and that's not a relationship of any form.
Well, I
That's
don't know if men I don't know if, like, generally speaking again, if men and women knew what a relationship was with regards to where we're going now, right? What's happening now globally is a breakdown of the old constructs where men and women's relationships were defined by very specific roles. And
right,
those roles have just essentially gone out the window.
right,
And so
right.
now everybody's like this.
They're all like scattered, like, what do we do?
Right,
Yeah.
but, the benefit of that is that it leaves space now, right? It leaves space for men and women and everyone out there, to redefine, things with respect to our multifaceted natures, and to relearn, or not to, maybe not even relearn, but, to maybe freshly learn a new dynamic where people actually really can be truly loved, right? I remember when I first learned, maybe back in high school, I think I was taking like a high school psychology class or something, this idea that the what we know is modern love, right? Where we get to choose our partner is such a small fraction of human history. Prior to that, men and women were getting married, in general for the benefit of survival, right? Or building themselves, in certain positions in society. If it wasn't for initially it's for survival, but then arranged marriages started happening, to ensure that families started becoming wealthier, or people could move up in courts, or into political positions. It was a business transaction, and there's still countries where it's like that too. It's more of a business transaction, and people have to learn how to fall in love with each other or just live with it, right?
Mhm.
Now the situation is you get to choose, at least in the developed nations, right? You get to choose, who you marry, who you love. And that's taken the traditional roles, definition out of the equation, right? And so people are even asking themselves, what does it mean to love? How do I love? Who do I love? Why do I love? What if I love this person and then I fall in love with another person? What if I actually am in love with two people? Can you be in love with two people? Right? There's all this ambiguity. It's like a soup, right? It's like a primordial soup. But that's why we have to step in, individually and collectively and say, okay, well, there's this soup, there's all these ingredients. What do we want to make of it? Because there's so much potential now for something where people can choose their mates and live in relationships where each person can be recognized for who they are, accepted for who they are, be transparent, be able to come to their partner and confess something that's uncomfortable and have it be responded to, with love. Be able to have a modern family and still the kid can grow up feeling loved. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I do feel very proud of this. When my ex-husband and I got divorced, my son was 2 years old, and my ex-husband and I met in, our Golden Dawn order, and we've always tried to live by higher principles. And we said, okay, just because we're divorced doesn't mean we have to traumatize our kid. We made a very specific agreement in the courthouse before we signed our divorce paperwork and saw the judge that we would be good to each other, that we would support each other, and that we would co-parent our son in a way to where he still feel loved. So, we haven't been together in, I don't like 15 years, but my son reports to me that he feels like he's had the most stable family experience of anyone he knows. All of his friends' parents divorced and they fight and they bicker and they just cause all kinds of strife around the kids, use the kids against each other. My ex-husband and I, we call each other Frouse, friend, spouse, or like fraud or spouse. We don't even like using the word, ex-husband, ex-wife, because it has such a negative connotation, right? But that to me is a great example of how, we can think outside of the box and create new definitions for what a relationship is, how to engage in a relationship, how to make that relationship positive, regardless of what kind of structure is emphasized around that relationship.
I 100% agree. So I think that maybe what we need to do is kind of define that. I can say personally that I would never want to be with somebody who held me back. I want to be with somebody who's going to support me, who's going to um, be okay with whatever I choose to wear, however I choose to dress, however I choose to do my hair, whatever it is that I feel that makes me feel good about myself. I want to be with somebody who supports any level of education or any spiritual path that I take. I want to be with somebody that I can actually have a conversation with about anything and everything, and not somebody who's, knocking me down for whatever reason. And I think that it's all about that, you know, equal exchange of energy that doesn't push somebody down, just like you would treat a friend. It's like, I think that that's kind of the missing link here, at least my perspective, is that the missing link is that there doesn't have to be a power struggle. There needs to be a union and an agreement between the two as to, you know, what I'm going to take care of. I mean, these are the things that tend to cause arguments in relationships, but, you know, how are we going to go into this? What's your part? What's my part? My husband and I actually have an agreement like that. We sat down and decided, who's going to take care of what. Um, so he does a lot of things that I don't like doing, you know, because he enjoys it. He likes sweeping and mopping and all that kind of stuff. And I'm kind of on the OCD side, you know, so if I'm going to do it, I have to like pull all the furniture out, clean every single corner, and get it like all perfect. So for me, I might do it once a week or once every couple of weeks or even once a month. And for him, it's like a daily thing. It's so we agreed that I'll do the deeper cleaning when I feel I have the energy to do it. And he'll just maintain the normal stuff. We went into this relationship with agreements like, here's what I hate doing, here's what you like doing, so why don't you do this and I'll do that. You know, when you're living with somebody, if you go into this relationship with expectations, just assuming this person is going to do certain things, you're really setting the relationship up for failure.
Oh,
Um,
I agree. I think it's it's become very normalized to meet someone, be attracted to them,
mhm.
maybe date. I mean, a lot of people, it seems like they just go have sex and now they're boyfriend and girlfriend,
Yeah.
but maybe date, but completely leave out the important component of asking, questions that are very relevant to if the relationship is going to hold up in the future. Like how, you know, what's your perspective on the role of men and women? What kind of relationship do you need? What is your love language? How, what happens when you get mad? How do you deal with that, right? Instead, it just kind of gets, it's like people are just spending their time enjoying each other's presence. It's learning kind of by this brute force method because some issue comes up where there's discrepant ideas on how to handle it. And now you have two people who just really, they enjoy each other. Maybe they've even fallen in love, but they haven't asked the questions to really get to know each other on those levels. And so now they have to sit there and figure out how to work out that conflict that they never even considered at all, and then find out, well, that person actually really has some values that are not congruent with my values. Okay, can I handle that? Can they handle that? Can we find common ground? Or are all of a sudden am I presented with a situation where I feel like that person's approach to a certain topic or situation is so against my own personal opinions on how to live life that now I have to give up somebody I've grown so close to in these other areas, right? That people have to be responsible about getting to know each other early on, in their relationships and have conversations about their values, their morals, their ethics, their approaches to life, finances, children. I dated a guy one time. We were together for, I don't know, 2.5 years. And prior to that, we had been friends for like 2 years. And I recall very specifically, like in the first few weeks of our friendship, I told him that I did not think it would be a good idea for me to have any more children because I had gotten past, the age where I would feel comfortable, trying to do that for the health sake of my own child, right? So I knew he knew that was always there. Yet, 2 years after us being friends, he decides to pursue a relationship with me. I agreed to it because we had been such great friends. And then, about, I don't know, 2.5 years into the relationship, he drops on me totally out of the blue. I want to have kids. And it was like a total punch in the gut, you know? I assumed because I mentioned that when we were friends, that he would have maybe told me his thoughts. I don't recall him doing that in the time. In fact, I know he didn't. Or that he would have reconsidered wanting to pursue dating me, knowing that I felt like I was above an age where I should, responsibly be trying to have children at that
Mhm.
point. And yet, I never specifically asked him. I just made an assumption, and he just decided he wanted to plow through. Maybe something would happen, but I ended up saying to him, like, look, this is a big deal. You want to have kids. How can we be in a relationship when I'm telling you right now, I don't feel like I should responsibly try for that. It's just, it ended up being the end of our relationship because we didn't have, those conversations when we entered into the relationship, after being friends for a while.
Yeah. So I think that people have lost the true meaning of love when it comes to relationships. So I'm gonna redefine what love is. Okay. So love is kind. Love is patient. Love does not envy the other person. It doesn't boast or act proud. It doesn't ever dishonor the other person. It is not self seeking. It's not easily angered. It doesn't keep records of everything that you've done wrong. Love doesn't delight in things that have gone wrong. It actually rejoices in truth. It protects, it trusts, it hopes, and it preserves. Love never fails. Now, obviously, that comes from a very special book. It's in Corinthians 13. And if we can just live our lives that way and treat our relationships that way, being kind, being patient, don't get angry, don't get all judgmental, don't, you know, fall into these spaces that creates problems. If we can come together as two equals that are different, okay? Obviously. If a cat and a dog can have a relationship, if a cat and a squirrel, senior post, can have a relationship, then a man and a woman can have a relationship. And he doesn't have to be domineering and controlling or overly submissive to where he has to lay down for her. And she doesn't have to be um, overly submissive herself or even demasculate him to prove her worth. None of these things need to happen. What happens here is that what is seems to be happening is that we've gone far right over here. Now we're like far left over here. And now it's time to find that middle ground, that middle path of honoring each other for the greatness that they are and the differences that they are, and really finding that true middle path of where love really exists within just being kind and patient and loyal and trusting and hopeful. And with that being said, do you have any last words?
Yeah, sure. I would just say, you know, regardless of how you identify yourself or what kind of relationship you have, male, female, etc., all of us have within us the divine masculine and feminine, and it can be in different proportions.
Right.
That's part of what makes you unique and an expression of the overall divine. Each one of us is a microcosmic expression. When we all come together collectively, we make an even larger microcosmic expression of the divine. And so, at any moment today, right now, in your next conversation with your lover, with your mate, with your child, with your parent, whatever the script has been before, you can change it. And maybe that requires learning some new skills, thinking outside the box, training yourself to be a little bit different. But you can always there's never a situation where it's the point of no return. Every human being on the planet, in my perspective, even the ones that are super psychotic, I believe there's something within every person that gives them the ability to transform themselves. And, if you're feeling, overburdened, if you're feeling like you can't find, a mate because you're not an asshole, or you can't find a man because there's no man that will respect you for who you are, as a woman, and still treat you as a woman, whatever the construct is that you have in your head, let yourself release that and engage in a new construct, which is that you're beautiful, you're unique, you're deserving of love, so is the other person. And if you, as Michelle quoted this beautiful verse from Corinthians, can practice and engage in the ideals of universal divine love, then you can heal yourself, and upon that have the power to heal others too. And that can create this new mentality for us, with respect to the collective consciousness that, in my opinion, we all deserve. We all deserve to be loved and to show love in a true, healthy, and divine manner. And I bless you all, and I love you all.
Yes, thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. You guys, I hope that you got something out of this. If there is any kind of healing that needs to be done, both Athena and I, we do work with people and helping them heal. So if that is something that you would like to kind of work with either one of us or both of us, reach out for it. We're here to help you. And that being said, with wisdom and love, we say goodnight.